The Tabernae in the Wilderness. There is no doubt that much of the material recorded in the first 5 books of the Old Testament is derived from the initiatory rituals of the Egyptian mysteries. The priests of Isis were deeply versed in occult lore, and the Israelites during their captivity in Egypt learned from them many things concerning the significance of divinity and the manner of worshiping it. The authorship of the first 5 books of the Old Testament is generally attributed to Moses, but whether or not he was the actual writer of them is a matter of controversy. There is considerable evidence to substantiate the hypothesis that the Pentateuch was compiled at a much later date, from oral traditions. Concerning the authorship of these books, Thomas Inman makes a rather startling statement. It is true that we have books which purport to be the books of Moses, so there are, or have been, books purporting to be written by Homer, Orpheus, Enoch, Mormon, and Junius. Yet the existence of the writings and the belief that they were written by those whose name they bear are no real evidences of the men or the genuineness of the works called by their names. It is true also that Moses is spoken of occasionally in the time of the early kings of Jerusalem, but it is clear that these passages are written by a late hand and have been introduced into the places where they are found, with the definite intention of making it appear that the lawgiver was known to David and Solomon. See Ancient Faiths Embodied in Ancient Names. While this noted scholar undoubtedly had much evidence to support his belief, it seems that this statement is somewhat too sweeping in character. It is apparently based upon the fact that Thomas Inman doubted the historical existence of Moses. This doubt was based upon the etymological resemblance of the word Moses to an ancient name for the sun. As the result of these deductions, Inman sought to prove that the lawgiver of Israel was merely another form of the omnipresent solar myth. While Inman demonstrated that by transposing 2 of the ancient letters, the word Moses, Wen, became Shema, Wan, an appellation of the celestial globe, he seems to have overlooked the fact that in the ancient mysteries, the initiates were often given names synonymous with the sun, to symbolize the fact that the redemption and regeneration of the solar power had been achieved within their own natures. It is far more probable that the man whom we know as Moses was an accredited representative of the secret schools, laboring, as many other emissaries have labored, to instruct primitive races in the mysteries of their immortal souls. The true name of the grand old man of Israel, who is known to history as Moses, will probably never be ascertained. The word Moses, when understood in its esoteric Egyptian sense, means one who has been admitted into the mystery schools of wisdom, and has gone forth to teach the ignorant concerning the will of the gods and the mysteries of life, as these mysteries were explained within the temples of Isis, Osiris, and Serapis. There is much controversy concerning the nationality of Moses. Some assert that he was a Jew, adopted and educated by the ruling house of Egypt. Others hold the opinion that he was a full-blooded Egyptian. A few even believe him to be identical with the immortal Hermes, for both these illustrious founders of religious systems received tablets from heaven supposedly written by the finger of God. The stories told concerning Moses, his discovery in the Ark of Bulrushes by Pharaoh's daughter, his adoption into the royal family of Egypt, and his later revolt against Egyptian autocracy coincide exactly with certain ceremonies through which the candidates of the Egyptian mysteries passed in their ritualistic wanderings in search of truth and understanding. The analogy can also be traced in the movements of the heavenly bodies. It is not strange that the erudite Moses, initiated in Egypt, should teach the Jews a philosophy containing the more important principles of Egyptian esotericism. The religions of Egypt at the time of the Israelitic captivity were far older than even the Egyptians themselves realized. Histories were difficult to compile in those days, and the Egyptians were satisfied to trace their race back to a mythological period when the gods themselves walked the earth, and with their own power established the double empire of the Nile. The Egyptians did not dream that these divine progenitors were the Atlanteans, who, forced to abandon their 7 islands because of volcanic cataclysms, had immigrated into Egypt, then an Atlantean colony, where they established a great philosophic and literary center of civilization, which was later to influence profoundly the religions and science of unnumbered races and peoples. Today, Egypt is forgotten, but things Egyptian will always be remembered and revered. Egypt is dead, yet it lives immortal in its philosophy and architectonics. As Odin founded his mysteries in Scandinavia and Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, so Moses, laboring with the then nomadic people of Israel's 12 tribes, established in the midst of them his secret and symbolic school, which has came to be known as the Tabernacle Mysteries. The Tabernacle of the Jews was merely a temple patterned after the temples of Egypt and transportable to meet the needs of that roving disposition which the Israelites were famous. Every part of the tabernacle and the enclosure which surrounded it was symbolic of some great natural or philosophic truth. To the ignorant, it was but a place to which to bring offerings and in which to make sacrifice. To the wise, it was a temple of learning, sacred to the universal spirit of wisdom. While the greatest minds of the Jewish and Christian worlds have realized that the Bible is a book of allegories, few seem to have taken the trouble to investigate its symbols and parables. When Moses instituted his mysteries, he is said to have given to a chosen few initiates certain oral teachings which could never be written but were to be preserved from one generation to the next by word-of-mouth transmission. Those instructions were in the form of philosophical keys, by means of which the allegories were made to reveal their hidden significance. These mystic keys to their sacred writings were called by the Jews the Kabbalah, Kabbalah. The modern world seems to have forgotten the existence of those unwritten teachings which explain satisfactorily the apparent contradictions of the written scriptures. Nor does it remember that the pagans appointed their two-faced Janus as custodian of the key to the Temple of Wisdom. Janus has been metamorphosed into St. Peter, so often symbolized as holding in his hand the key to the gate of heaven. The gold and silver keys of God's vicar on earth, the Pope, symbolizes this secret doctrine, which, when properly understood, unlocks the treasure chest of the Christian and Jewish Kabbalah. The temples of Egyptian mysticism, from which the tabernacle was copied, were, according to their own priests, miniature representations of the universe. The solar system was always regarded as a great temple of initiation, which candidates entered through the gates of birth. After threading the tortuous passageways of earthly existence, they finally approached the veil of the great mystery, death, through whose gate they vanished back into the invisible world. Socrates subtly reminded his disciples that death was, in reality, the great initiation, for his last words were, "Credo, I owe a cock to Asclepius. Will you remember to pay the debt?" As the rooster was sacred to the gods and the sacrifice of this bird accompanied a candidate's introduction into the mysteries, Socrates implied that he was about to take his great initiation. Life is the great mystery, and only those who pass successfully through its tests and trials, interpreting them aright and extracting the essence of experience therefrom, achieve true understanding. Thus, the temples were built in the form of the world, and their rituals were based upon life and its multitudinous problems. Nor only was the tabernacle itself patterned according to Egyptian mysticism, its utensils were also of ancient and accepted form. The Ark of the Covenant itself was an adaptation of the Egyptian Ark, even to the kneeling figures upon its lid. Bas-reliefs on the Temple of Philae show Egyptian priests carrying their ark, which closely resembled the Ark of the Jews, upon their shoulders by means of staves like those described in Exodus. The following description of the tabernacle and its priests is based upon the account of its construction and ceremonies recorded by Josephus in the third book of his Antiquities of the Jews. The Bible references are from a Breeches Bible, famous for its rendering of the 7th verse of the 3rd chapter of Genesis, printed in London in 1599, and the quotations are reproduced in their original spelling and punctuation. The building of the tabernacle. Moses, speaking for Jehovah, the God of Israel, appointed 2 architects to superintend the building of the tabernacle. They were Bezaleel, the son of Uri, of the tribe of Judah, and Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. Their popularity was so great that they were also the unanimous choice of the people. When Jacob upon his deathbed blessed his sons, see Genesis Lix, he assigned to each a symbol. The symbol of Judah was a lion, that of Dan a serpent or a bird, possibly an eagle. The lion and the eagle are two of the four beasts of the cherubim, the fixed signs of the zodiac, and the Rosicrucian alchemists maintained that the mysterious stone of the wise, the soul, was compounded with the aid of the blood of the red lion and the gluten of the white eagle. It seems probable that there is a hidden mystic relationship between fire, the red lion, water, the white eagle, as they were used in occult chemistry, and the representatives of these two tribes whose symbols were identical with these alchemical elements. As the tabernacle was the dwelling place of God among men, likewise the soul body in man is the dwelling place of his divine nature, round which gathers a 12-fold material constitution in the same manner that the tribes of Israel camped about the enclosure sacred to Jehovah. The idea that the tabernacle was really symbolic of an invisible spiritual truth outside the comprehension of the Israelites is substantiated by a statement made in the 8th chapter of Hebrews, who serve unto the pattern and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was warned by God when he was about to finish the tabernacle. Here we find the material physical place of worship called a shadow or symbol of a spiritual institution, invisible but omnipotent. The specifications of the tabernacle are described in the book of Exodus, 25th chapter. Then the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they receive an offering for me. Of every man whose heart giveth it freely, ye shall take the offering for me. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them, gold and silver, and brass, and blue silk, and purple, and scarlet, and fine linen, and goat's hair, and rams' skins colored red, and the skins of badgers, and the wood shittim, oil for the light, spices for anointing oil, and for the perfume of sweet favor, onyx stones, and stories to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. Also they shall make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. According to all that I show thee, even so shall ye make the form of the tabernacle, and the fashion of all the instruments thereof. The court of the tabernacle was an enclosed area, 50 cubits wide and 100 cubits long, circumscribed by a wall of linen curtains hung from brazen pillars 5 cubits apart. The cubit is an ancient standard of measurement, its length being equal to the distance between the elbow and the extreme end of the index finger, approximately 18 inches. There were 20 of these pillars on each of the longer sides and 10 on the shorter. Each pillar had a base of brass and a capital of silver. The tabernacle was always laid out with the long sides facing north and south and the short sides facing east and west, with the entrance to the east, thus showing the influence of primitive sun worship. The outer court served the principal purpose of isolating the tent of the tabernacle proper, which stood in the midst of the enclosure. At the entrance to the courtyard, which was in the eastern face of the rectangle, stood the altar of burnt offerings, made of brass plates over wood and ornamented with the horns of bulls and rams. Farther in, but on a line with this altar, stood the laver of purification, a great vessel containing water for priestly ablutions. The laver was twofold in its construction, the upper part being a large bowl, probably covered, which served as a source of supply for a lower basin in which the priests bathed themselves before participating in the various ceremonials. It is supposed that this laver was encrusted with the metal mirrors of the women of the 12 tribes of Israel. The dimensions of the tabernacle proper were as follows. Its length, when it was set up, was 30 cubits, and its breadth was 10 cubits. The one of its walls was on the south, and the other was exposed to the north, and on the back part of it remained the west. It was necessary that its height should be equal to its breadth, 10 cubits. Josephus. It is the custom of bibliologists to divide the interior of the tabernacle into 2 rooms. One room 10 cubits wide, 10 cubits high, and 20 cubits long, which was called the Holy Place and contained 3 special articles of furniture, namely the 7-branched candlestick, the table of the shewbread, and the altar of burnt incense. The other room, 10 cubits wide, 10 cubits high, and 10 cubits long, which was called the Holy of Holies and contained but one article of furniture, the Ark of the Covenant. The 2 rooms were separated from each other by an ornamental veil upon which were embroidered many kinds of flowers, but no animal or human figures. Josephus hints that there was a third compartment which was found by subdividing the holy place, at least hypothetically, into two chambers. The Jewish historian is not very explicit in his description of this third room, and the majority of writers seem to have entirely overlooked and neglected this point, although Josephus emphatically states that Moses himself divided the inner tent into three sections. The veil separating the holy place from the Holy of Holies was hung across 4 pillars, which probably indicated in a subtle way the 4 elements. While at the entrance to the tent proper, the Jews placed 7 pillars, referring to the 7 senses and the 7 vowels of the sacred name. That later only 5 pillars are mentioned may be accounted for by the fact that at the present time, man has only 5 developed senses and 5 active vowels. The early Jewish writer of the Baraitha treats of the curtains as follows. From all stains of impurity, for none who is not clean in both body and mind can enter into the presence of divinity and live. Beyond the laver of purification was the entrance to the tabernacle proper, facing the east, so that the first rays of the rising sun might enter and light the chamber. Between the encrusted pillars could be seen the holy place, a mysterious chamber, its walls hung with magnificent drapes embroidered with the faces of cherubs, the robes of glory. As explained in the quotation from Josephus, the robes and adornments of the Jewish priests had a secret significance, and even to this day, there is a religious cipher language concealed in the colors, forms, and uses of sacred garments, not only among the Christian and Jewish priests, but also among pagan religions. The vestments of the tabernacle priests were called kahanses. Those of the high priest were termed kahanses rabsi. Over the machanes, an undergarment resembling short trousers, they wore the chethon, a finely woven linen robe, which reached to the ground and had long sleeves tied to the arms of the wearer. A brightly embroidered sash, twisted several times around the waist, a little higher than is customary, with one end pendant in front, and a closely fitting linen cap, designated masneamthes, completed the costume of the ordinary priest. The vestments of the high priest were the same as those of the lesser degrees, except that certain garments and adornments were added. Over the specially woven white linen robe, the high priest wore a seamless and sleeveless habit, sky blue in color and reaching nearly to his feet. This was called the mir and was ornamented with a fringe of alternated golden bells and pomegranates. In Ecclesiasticus, one of the books rejected from the Modem Bible, these bells and their purpose are described in the following words. And he compassed him with pomegranates, and with many golden bells round about, that as he went there might be a sound and a noise that might be heard in the temple for a memorial to the children of his people. The mir was also bound in with a variegated girdle finely embroidered and with gold wire inserted through the embroidery. The ephod, a short vestment described by Josephus as resembling a coat or jacket, was worn over the upper part of the mir. The threads of which the ephod was woven were of many colors, probably red, blue, purple, and white, like the curtains and coverings of the tabernacle. Fine gold wires were also woven into the fabric. The ephod was fastened at each shoulder with a large onyx in the form of a button, and the names of the 12 sons of Jacob were engraven upon these 2 stones, 6 on each. These onyx buttons were supposed to have oracular powers, and when the high priest asked certain questions, they emitted a celestial radiance. When the onyx on the right shoulder was illuminated, it signified that Jehovah answered the question of the high priest. In the affirmative, and when the one on the left gleamed, it indicated a negative answer to the query. In the middle of the front surface of the ephod was a space to accommodate the essen, or breastplate of righteousness and prophecy, which, as its name signifies, was also an oracle of great power. This pectoral was roughly square in shape and consisted of a frame of embroidery into which were set 12 stones, each held in a socket of gold. Because of the great weight of its stones, each of which was of considerable size and immense value, the breastplate was held in position by special golden chains and ribbons. The 12 stones of the breastplate, like the onyx stones at the shoulders of the ephod, had the mysterious power of lighting up with divine glory and so serving as oracles. Concerning the strange power of these flashing symbols of Israel's 12 tribes, Josephus writes, "Yet will I mention what is still more wonderful than this. For God declared beforehand, by those 12 stones which the high priest bare upon his breast, and which were inserted into his breastplate, when they should be victorious in battle. For so great a splendor shone forth from them before the army began to march, that all the people were sensible of God's being present for their assistance. Whence it came to pass that those Greeks who had a veneration for our laws, because they could not possibly contradict this, called the breastplate the oracle." The writer then adds that the stones ceased to light up and gleam some 200 years before he wrote his history, because the Jews had broken the laws of Jehovah, and the God of Israel was no longer pleased with his chosen people. The Jews learned astronomy from the Egyptians, and it is not unlikely that the 12 jewels of the breastplate were symbolic of the 12 constellations of the zodiac. These 12 celestial hierarchies were looked upon as jewels adorning the breastplate of the universal man, the macroprosophos, who is referred to in the Zohar as the Ancient of Days. The number 12 frequently occurs among ancient peoples who in nearly every case had a pantheon consisting of 12 demigods and goddesses presided over by the Invincible One, who was himself subject to the incomprehensible All-Father. This use of the number 12 is especially noted in the Jewish and Christian writings. The 12 prophets, the 12 patriarchs, the 12 tribes, and the 12 apostles, each group has a certain occult significance, for each refers to the divine duodecimo, or 12-fold deity, whose emanations are manifested in the tangible created universe through 12 individualized channels. The secret doctrine also caught the priests that the jewels represented centers of life within their own constitutions, which when unfolded according to the esoteric instructions of the temple, were capable of absorbing into themselves and radiating forth again the divine light of the deity. The East Indian lotus blossoms have a similar meaning. The rabbis have taught that each twisted linen thread used in weaving the tabernacle curtains and ornamentations consisted of 24 separate strands, reminding the discerning that the experience gained during the 24 hours of the day, symbolized in masonry by the 24-inch rule, becomes the threads from which are woven the garments of glory. The Urim and Thummim. In the reverse side of the essen, or breastplate, was a pocket containing mysterious objects, the Urim and Thummim. Aside from the fact that they were used in divination, little is now known about these objects. Some writers contend that they were small stones, resembling the fetishes still revered by certain aboriginal peoples, which the Israelites had brought with them out of Egypt because of their belief that they possessed divine power. Others believe that the Urim and Thummim were in the form of dice, used for deciding events by being cast upon the ground. A few have maintained that they were merely sacred names written on plates of gold and carried as talismans. According to some, the Urim and the Thummim signify lights and perfections, or tight and truth, which last present a striking analogy to the two figures of Ra and Thamai in the breastplate worn by the Egyptians. Gardeners the faiths of the world. Not the least remarkable of the vestments of the high priest was his bonnet or headdress. Over the plain white cap of the ordinary priest, this dignitary wore an outer cloth of blue and a crown of gold, the crown consisting of 3 bands, one above the other like the triple mitre of the Persian magi. This crown symbolized that the high priest was ruler not only over the 3 worlds which the ancients had differentiated, heaven, earth, and hell, but also over the threefold divisions of man and the universe, the spiritual, intellectual, and material worlds. These divisions were also symbolized by the 3 apartments of the tabernacle itself. The second postulate. Those Masonic brethren who have investigated the subject accept the historical existence of the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross, but are divided concerning the origin of the order. One group holds the society originated in medieval Europe as an outgrowth of alchemical speculation. Robert McCoy, 33 Grees, believes that Johann Valentin Andreas, a German theologian, was the true founder, and he also believes it possible that this divine merely reformed and amplified an existing society which had been founded by Sir Henry Cornelius Agrippa. Some believe that Rosicrucianism represented the first European invasion of Buddhist and Brahmin culture. Still others hold the opinion that the Society of the Rose Cross was founded in Egypt during the philosophic supremacy of that empire, and that it also perpetuated the mysteries of ancient Persia and Chaldea. In his Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins writes, "The Rosicrucians of Germany are quite ignorant of their origin, but by tradition they suppose themselves descendants of the ancient Egyptians, Chaldeans, Magi, and Gymnosophists." The last was a name given by the followers of Alexander the Great to a caste of naked wise men whom they found meditating along the riverbanks in India. The consensus among these factions is that the story of Father CRC, like the Masonic legend of Hiram Abiff, is an allegory and should not be considered literally. A similar problem has confronted students of the Bible, who have found not only difficult, but in the majority of cases, impossible, their efforts to substantiate the historical interpretation of the scriptures. Admitting the existence of the Rosicrucians as a secret society with both philosophic and political ends, it is remarkable that an organization with members in all parts of Europe could maintain absolute secrecy throughout the centuries. Nevertheless, the Brothers of the Rose Cross were apparently able to accomplish this. A great number of scholars and philosophers, among them Sir Francis Bacon and Wolfgang von Goethe, have been suspected of affiliation with the order, but their connection has not been established to the satisfaction of prosaic historians. Pseudo-Rosicrucians abounded, but the true members of the ancient and secret order of the unknown philosophers have successfully lived up to their name. To this day, they remain unknown. During the Middle Ages, a number of tracts appeared, purporting to be from the pens of Rosicrucians. Many of them, however, were spurious, being issued for their self-aggrandizement by unscrupulous persons who used the revered and magic name Rosicrucian in the hope of gaining religious or political power. This has greatly complicated the work of investigating the society. One group of pseudo-Rosicrucians went so far as to supply its members with a black cord by which they were to know each other, and warned them that if they broke their vow of secrecy, the cord would be used to strangle them. Few of the principles of Rosicrucianism have been preserved in literature, for the original fraternity published only fragmentary accounts of its principles and activities. In his Secret Symbols of the Rosicrucians, Dr. Franz Hartmann describes the fraternity as a secret society of men possessing superhuman, if not supernatural, powers. They were said to be able to prophesy future events, to penetrate into the deepest mysteries of nature, to transform iron, copper, lead, or mercury into gold, to prepare an elixir of life or universal panacea, by the use of which they could preserve their youth and manhood. And moreover, it was believed that they could command the elemental spirits of nature and knew the secret of the philosopher's stone, a substance which rendered him who possessed it all-powerful, immortal, and supremely wise. The symbolic principles of Rosicrucianism are so profound that even today they are little appreciated. Their charts and diagrams are concerned with weighty cosmic principles which they treat with a philosophic understanding, decidedly refreshing when compared with the orthodox narrowness prevalent in their day. According to the available records, the Rosicrucians were bound together by mutual aspirations rather than by the laws of a fraternity. The Brothers of the Rose Cross are believed to have lived unobtrusively, laboring industriously in trades and professions, disclosing their secret affiliation to no one, in many cases not even to their own families. After the death of CRC, most of the brethren apparently had no central meeting place. Whatever initiatory ritual the order possessed was so closely guarded that it has never been revealed. Doubtless it was couched in chemical terminology. Efforts to join the order were apparently futile, for the Rosicrucians always chose their disciples. Having agreed on one who they believed would do honor to their illustrious fraternity, they communicated with him in one of many mysterious ways. He might receive a letter, either anonymous or with a peculiar seal, usually bearing the letters CRC or RC upon it. He would be instructed to go to a certain place at an appointed time. What was disclosed to him he never revealed, although in many cases his later writings showed that a new influence had come into his life, deepening his understanding and broadening his intellect. A few have written allegorically concerning what they beheld when in the august presence of the Brethren of the Rose Cross. Alchemists were sometimes visited in their laboratories by mysterious strangers who delivered learned discourses concerning the secret processes of the Hermetic arts, and after disclosing certain processes, departed, leaving no trace. Others declared that the Brothers of the Rose Cross communicated with them through dreams and visions, revealing the secrets of Hermetic wisdom to them while they were asleep. Having been instructed, the candidate was bound to secrecy, not only concerning the chemical formulae which had been disclosed to him, but also concerning the method by which he had secured them. While these nameless adepts were suspected of being Brothers of the Rose Cross, it could never be proved who they were, and those visited could only conjecture. Many suspect the Rosicrucian rose to be a conventionalization of the Egyptian and Hindu lotus blossom, with the same symbolic meaning as this more ancient symbol. The Divine Comedy stamps Dante Alighieri as being familiar with the theory of Rosicrucianism. Concerning this point, Albert Pike in his Morals and Dogma makes this significant statement. His hell is but a negative purgatory. His heaven is composed of a series of Kabbalistic circles, divided by a cross, like the Pantacle of Ezekiel. In the center of this cross blooms a rose, and we see the symbol of the adepts of the Rose Cross for the first time publicly expounded and almost categorically explained. Doubt has always existed as to whether the name Rosicrucian came from the symbol of the rose and cross, or whether this was merely a blind to deceive the uninformed and further conceal the true meaning of the order. Godfrey Higgins believes that the word Rosicrucian is not derived from the flower, but from the word rose, which means dew. It is also interesting to note that the word ros means wisdom, while rus is translated concealment. Doubtless all of these meanings have contributed to Rosicrucian symbolism. It is probable that Rosicrucian symbolism is a perpetuation of the secret tenets of the Egyptian Hermes, and that the Society of Unknown Philosophers is the true link connecting modern Masonry with its mass of symbols to ancient Egyptian Hermeticism, the source of that symbolism. In his Doctrine and Literature of the Kabbalah, A.E. Waite makes this important observation. There are certain indications which point to a possible connection between Masonry and Rosicrucianism, and this, if admitted, would constitute the first link in its connection with the past. The evidence is, however, inconclusive, or at least unextricated. Freemasonry per se, in spite of the affinity with mysticism which I have just mentioned, has never exhibited any mystic character, nor has it a clear notion how it came by its symbols. Many of those connected with the development of Freemasonry were suspected of being Rosicrucians. Some, as in the case of Robert Flood, even wrote defenses of this organization. Frank C. Higgins, a modern Masonic symbolist, writes, Dr. Ashmole, a member of this fraternity, Rosicrucian, is revered by Masons as one of the founders of the first Grand Lodge in London. See Ancient Freemasonry. Elias Ashmole is but one of many intellectual links connecting Rosicrucianism with the genesis of Freemasonry. The Encyclopedia Britannica notes that Elias Ashmole was initiated into the Freemasonic Order in 1646, and further states that he was the first gentleman or amateur to be accepted. On this same subject, Papus, in his Tarot of the Bohemians, has written, "We must not forger that the Rosicrucians were the initiators of Leibniz and the founders of actual Freemasonry through Ashmole." If the founders of Freemasonry were initiated into the great arcanum of Egypt, and the symbolism of modern Masonry would indicate that such was the case, then it is reasonable to suppose that they secured their information from a society whose existence they admitted and which was duly qualified to teach them these symbols and allegories. One theory concerning the two orders is to the effect that Freemasonry was an outgrowth of Rosicrucianism. In other words, that the unknown philosophers became known through an organization which they created to serve them in the material world. The story goes on to relate that the Rosicrucian adepts became dissatisfied with their progeny and silently withdrew from the Masonic hierarchy, leaving behind their symbolism and allegories, but carrying away the keys by which the locked symbols could be made to give tip their secret meanings. Speculators have gone so far as to state that, In their opinion, modern Freemasonry has completely absorbed Rosicrucianism and succeeded it as the world's greatest secret society. Other minds of equal learning declare that the Rosicrucian Brotherhood still exists, preserving its individuality as the result of having withdrawn from the Masonic order. According to a widely accepted tradition, the headquarters of the Rosicrucian order is near Carlsbad, in Austria. See Dr. Franz Flartman. Another version has it that a mysterious school, resembling in general principles the Rosicrucian fraternity, which calls itself the Bohemian Brothers, still maintains its individuality in the Schwarzwald, Black Forest of Germany. One thing is certain, with the rise of Freemasonry, the Rosicrucian order in Europe practically disappeared, and notwithstanding existing statements to the contrary, it is certain that the 18th degree, commonly known as the Rose Croix, perpetuates many of the symbols of the Rosicrucian fire alchemists. The third postulate. The third theory takes the form of a sweeping denial of Rosicrucianism, asserting that the so-called original order never had any foundation in fact, but was entirely a product of imagination. This viewpoint is best expressed by a number of questions which are still being asked by investigators of this elusive group of metaphysicians. Was the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross merely a mythical institution created in the fertile mind of some literary cynic for the purpose of deriding the alchemical and Hermetic sciences? Did the House of the Holy Spirit ever exist outside the imagination of some medieval mystic? Was the whole Rosicrucian story a satire to ridicule the gullibility of scholastic Europe? Was the mysterious Father CRC a product of the literary genius of Johann Valentin Andreas, or another of similar mind, who, attempting to score alchemical and Hermetic philosophy, unwittingly became a great power in furthering the cause of its promulgation? That at least one of the early documents of the Rosicrucians was from the pen of Andres, there is little doubt, but for just what purpose he compiled it still remains a matter of speculation. Did Andres himself receive from some UN-owned person or persons instructions to be carried out? If he wrote the chemical nuptials of Christian Rosenkreutz when only 15 years old, was he overshadowed in the preparation of that book? To these vital questions, no answers are forthcoming. A number of persons accepted the magnificent imposture of Andres as absolute truth. It is maintained by many that, as a consequence, numerous pseudo-societies sprang up, each asserting that it was the organization concerning which the Faina Fratemitatis and the Confessio Fratemitatis were written. Beyond doubt, there are many spurious orders in existence today, but few of them can offer valid claims that their history dates back farther than the beginning of the 19th century. The mystery associated with the Rosicrucian fraternity has resulted in endless controversy. Many able minds, notable among them Eugenius Philalethes, Michael Meyer, John Hay Dawn, and Robert Flood, defended the concrete existence of the Society of Unknown Philosophers. Others equally qualified have asserted it to be of fraudulent origin and doubtful existence. Eugenius Philalethes, while dedicating books to the order and himself writing an extended exposition of its principles, disclaims all personal connection with it. Many others have done likewise. Some are of the opinion that Sir Francis Bacon had a hand in the writing of the Fama and Confessio Fraternitatis, on the basis that the rhetorical style of these works is similar to that of Bacon's New Atlantis. They also contend that certain statements in the latter work point to an acquaintance with Rosicrucian symbology. The elusiveness of the Rosicrucians has caused them to be favorite subjects for literary works. Outstanding among the romances which have been woven around them is Zanoni. The author, Lord Bulwer-Lytton, is regarded by some as a member of the order, while others assert that he applied for membership but was rejected. Pope's Rape of the Lock and Conte de Gabalis by Abbe de Villars and essays by De Quincey, Flartman, Jennings, Mackenzie, and others are examples of Rosicrucian literature. Although the existence of these medieval Rosicrucians is difficult to prove, sufficient evidence is at hand to make it extremely probable that there existed in Germany, and afterwards in France, Italy, England, and other European countries, a secret society of illuminated savants who made contributions of great import to the sum of human knowledge, while maintaining absolute secrecy concerning their personalities and their organization. The fourth postulate. The apparent incongruities of the Rosicrucian controversy have also been accounted for by a purely transcendental explanation. There is evidence that early writers were acquainted with such a supposition, which, however, was popularized only after it had been espoused by Theosophy. This theory asserts that the Rosicrucians actually possessed all the supernatural powers with which they were credited, that they were in reality citizens of two worlds. That, while they had physical bodies for expression on the material plane, they were also capable, through the instructions they received from the Brotherhood, of functioning in a mysterious ethereal body not subject to the limitations of time or distance. By means of this astral form, they were able to function in the invisible realm of nature, and in this realm, beyond reach of the profane, their temple was located. According to this viewpoint, the true Rosicrucian Brotherhood consisted of a limited number of highly developed adepts, or initiates, those of the higher degrees being no longer subject to the laws of mortality. Candidates were accepted into the order only after long periods of probation. Adepts possessed the secret of the philosopher's stone and knew the process of transmuting the base metals into gold, but taught that these were only allegorical terms, concealing the true mystery of human regeneration through the transmutation of the base elements of man's lower nature into the gold of intellectual and spiritual realization. According to this theory, those who have sought to record the events of importance in connection with the Rosicrucian controversy have invariably failed because they approached their subject from a purely physical or materialistic angle. These adepts were believed to have been able to teach man how to function away from his physical body at will by assisting him to remove the rose from the cross. They taught that the spiritual nature was attached to the material form at certain points, symbolized by the nails of the crucifixion, but by 3 alchemical initiations which took place in the spiritual world, in the true temple of the Rose Cross, they were able to draw these nails and permit the divine nature of man to come down from its cross. They concealed the processes by which this was accomplished under 3 alchemical metaphoric expressions: the casting of the molten sea, the making of the rose diamond, and the achieving of the philosopher's stone. While the intellectualist flounders among contradictory theories, the mystic treats the problem in an entirely different manner. He believes that the true Rosicrucian fraternity, consisting of a school of supermen, not unlike the fabled Mahatmas of India, is an institution existing not in the visible world, but in its spiritual counterpart, which he sees fit to call the inner planes of nature. That the brothers can be reached only by those who are capable of transcending the limitations of the material world. To substantiate their viewpoint, these mystics cite the following significant statement from the Confessio Fraternitatis: 1,000 times the unworthy may clamor, 1,000 times may present themselves, yet God hath commanded our ears that they should hear none of them, and hath so compassed us about with his clouds that unto us, his servants, no violence can be done. Wherefore now no longer are we beheld by human eyes, unless they have received strength borrowed from the eagle. In mysticism, the eagle is a symbol of initiation, the spinal spirit fire, and by this is explained the inability of the unregenerated world to understand the secret order of the Rose Cross. Rosicrucian doctrines and tenets trustworthy information is unavailable concerning the actual philosophical beliefs, political aspirations, and humanitarian activities of the Rosicrucian fraternity. Today, as of old, the mysteries of the society are preserved inviolate by virtue of their essential nature, and attempts to interpret Rosicrucian philosophy are but speculations, anything to the contrary notwithstanding. Evidence points to the probable existence of 2 distinct Rosicrucian bodies, an inner organization whose members never revealed their identity or teachings to the world, and an outer body under the supervision of the inner group. In all probability, the symbolic tomb of Christian Rosenkreutz, Knight of the Golden Stone, was in reality this outer body, the spirit of which is in a more exalted sphere. For a period of more than a century, subsequent to 1614, the outer body circulated tracts and manifestos under either its own name or the names of various initiated members. The purpose of these writings was apparently to confuse and mislead investigators, and thus effectively to conceal the actual designs of the fraternity. When Rosicrucianism became the philosophical fad of the 17th century, numerous documents on the subject were also circulated for purely commercial purposes by impostors desirous of capitalizing its popularity. The cunningly contrived artifices of the fraternity itself and the blundering literary impostures of charlatans formed a double veil behind which the inner organization carried on its activities in a manner totally dissimilar to its purposes and principles as publicly disseminated. The Fratres Rosicrucis naively refer to the misunderstandings which they have for obvious reasons permitted to exist concerning themselves as being clouds within which they labor and behind which they are concealed. An inkling of the substance of Rosicrucianism, its esoteric doctrines, can be gleaned from an analysis of its shadow, its exoteric writings. In one of the most important of their clouds, the Confessio Fraternitatis, the brethren of the fraternity of RC seek to justify their existence and explain the purposes and activities of their order. In its original form, the Confessio is divided into 14 chapters, which are here epitomized. Confessio Fraternitatis RC et Eruditus Europe, Chapter 1. Do not through hasty judgment or prejudice misinterpret the statements concerning our fraternity published in our previous manifesto, the Fina Fraternitatis. Jehovah, beholding the decadence of civilization, seeks to redeem humanity by revealing to the willing and by thrusting upon the reluctant those secrets which previously he had reserved for his elect. By this wisdom the godly shall be saved, but the sorrows of the ungodly shall be multiplied. While the true purpose of our order was set forth in the Fama Fraternitatis, misunderstandings have arisen through which we have been falsely accused of heresy and treason. In this document we hope so to clarify our position that the learned of Europe will be moved to join with us in the dissemination of divine knowledge according to the will of our illustrious founder. Chapter 2. While it is alleged by many that the philosophic side, JBH, of our day is sound, we declare it to be false and soon to die of its own inherent weakness. Just as nature, however, provides a remedy for each new disease that manifests itself, so our fraternity has provided a remedy for the infirmities of the world's philosophic system. The secret philosophy of the RC is founded upon that knowledge which is the sum and head of all faculties, sciences, and arts. By our divinely revealed system, which partakes much of theology and medicine, but little of jurisprudence, we analyze the heavens and the earth, but mostly we study man himself, within whose nature is concealed the supreme secret. If the learned of out day will accept our invitation and join themselves to our fraternity, we will reveal to them undreamed of secrets and wonders concerning the hidden workings of nature. Chapter 3. Do not believe that the secrets discussed in this brief document are lightly esteemed by us. We cannot describe fully the marvels of our fraternity, lest the uninformed be overwhelmed by our astonishing declarations and the vulgar ridicule the mysteries which they do not comprehend. We also fear that many will be confused by the unexpected generosity of our proclamation. For not understanding the wonders of this sixth age, they do, nor realize the great changes which are to come. Like blind men living in a world full of light, they discern only through the sense of feeling. By sight is implied spiritual cognition, by feeling, the material senses. Chapter 4. We firmly believe that through deep meditation on the inventions of the human mind and the mysteries of life, through the cooperation of the angels and spirits, and through experience and long observation, our loving Christian Father CRC was so fully illumined with God's wisdom that were all the books and writings of the world lost and the foundations of science overturned, the fraternity of RC could re-establish the structure of world thought upon the foundation of divine truth and integrity. Because of the great depth and perfection of our knowledge, those desiring to understand the mysteries of the fraternity of RC cannot attain to that wisdom immediately, but must grow in understanding and knowledge. Therefore, our fraternity is divided into grades through which each must ascend step by step to the great arcanum. Now that it has pleased God to lighten unto us his sixth candelabrum, is it not better to seek truth in this way than to wander through the labyrinths of worldly ignorance? Furthermore, those who receive this knowledge shall become masters of all arts and crafts. No secret shall be hidden from them, and all good works of the past, present, and future shall be accessible to them. The whole world shall become as one book, and the contradictions of science and theology shall be reconciled. Rejoice, O humanity, for the time has come when God has decreed that the number of our fraternity shall be increased, a labor that we have joyously undertaken. The doors of wisdom are now open to the world, but only to those who have earned the privilege may the brothers present themselves, for it is forbidden to reveal our knowledge even to our own children. The right to receive spiritual truth cannot be inherited. It must be evolved within the soul of man himself. Chapter 5. Though we may be accused of indiscretion in offering our treasures so freely and promiscuously, without discriminating between the godly, the wise, the prince, the peasant, we affirm that we have not betrayed our trust, for although we have published our fama in 5 languages, only those understand it who have that right. Our society is not to be discovered by curiosity seekers, but only by serious and consecrated thinkers. Nevertheless, we have circulated our fama in 5 mother tongues, so that the righteous of all nations may have an opportunity to know of us, even though they be not scholars. 1,000 times the unworthy may present themselves and clamor at the gates, but God has forbidden us of the fraternity of RC to hear their voices, and he has surrounded us with his clouds and his protection so that no harm may come to us. And God has decreed that we of the order of RC can no longer be seen by mortal eyes unless they have received strength borrowed from the eagle. We further affirm that we shall reform the governments of Europe and pattern them according to the system applied by the philosophers of Damkar. All men desirous of securing knowledge shall receive as much as they are capable of understanding. The rule of false theology shall be overthrown, and God shall make his will known through his chosen philosophers. Chapter 7. Because of the need of brevity, it is enough to say that our father CRC was born in the year 1378 and departed at the age of 106, leaving to us the labor of spreading die doctrine of philosophic religion to the entire world. Our fraternity is open to all who sincerely seek for truth, but we publicly warn the false and impious that they cannot betray or injure us, for God has protected our fraternity, and all who seek to do it harm shall have their evil designs return and destroy them, while the treasures of our fraternity shall remain untouched, to be used by the lion in the establishment of his kingdom. Chapter 7. We declare that God, before the end of the world, shall create a great flood of spiritual light to alleviate the sufferings of humankind. Falsehood and darkness, which have crept into the arts, sciences, religions, and governments of humanity, making it difficult for even the wise to discover the path of reality, shall be forever removed, and a single standard established, so that all may enjoy the fruitage of truth. We shall not be recognized as those responsible for this change, for people shall say that it is the result of the progressiveness of the age. Great are the reforms about to take place, but we of the fraternity of RC do not arrogate to ourselves the glory for this divine reformation, since many there are, not members of our fraternity, but honest, true, and wise men, who by their intelligence and their writings shall hasten its coming. We testify that sooner the stones shall rise up and offer their services than that there shall be any lack of righteous persons to execute the will of God upon earth. Chapter 8. That no one may doubt, we declare that God has sent messengers and signs in the heavens, namely, the new stars in Sagittarius and Cygnus, to show that a great council of the elect is to take place. This proves that God reveals invisible nature for the discerning few, signs and symbols of all things that are coming to pass. God has given man 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and 2 ears, but only 1 tongue. Whereas the eyes, the nostrils, and the ears admit the wisdom of nature into the mind, the tongue alone may give it forth. In various ages there have been illumined ones who have seen, smelt, tasted, or heard the will of God, but it will shortly come to pass that those who have seen, smelt, tasted, or heard shall speak, and truth shall be revealed. Chapter 9. We have a magic writing, copied from that divine alphabet, with which God writes his will upon the face of celestial and terrestrial nature. With this new language, we read God's will for all his creatures, and just as astronomers predict eclipses, so we prognosticate the obscurations of the church and how long they shall last. Our language is like unto that of Adam and Enoch before the fall, and though we understand and can explain our mysteries in this our sacred language, we cannot do so in Latin, a tongue contaminated by the confusion of Babylon. Chapter 10. Although there are still certain powerful persons who oppose and hinder us, because of which we must remain concealed, we exhort those who would become of our fraternity to study unceasingly the sacred scriptures, for such as do this cannot be far from us. We do not mean that the Bible should be continually in the mouth of man, but that he should search for its true and eternal meaning, which is seldom discovered by theologians, scientists, or mathematicians, because they are blinded by the opinions of their sects. Chapter 1. We wish the statements we made in the Faena Fraternitatis concerning the transmutation of metals and the universal medicine to be lightly understood. While we realize that both these works are attainable by man, we fear that many really great minds may be led away from the true quest of knowledge and understanding if they permit themselves to limit their investigation to the transmutation of metals. When to a man is given power to heal disease, to overcome poverty, and to reach a position of worldly dignity, that man is beset by numerous temptations, and unless he possess true knowledge and full understanding, he will become a terrible menace to mankind. The alchemist who attains to the art of transmuting base metals can do all manner of evil unless his understanding be as great as his self-created wealth. We therefore affirm that man must first gain knowledge, virtue, and understanding, then all other things may be added unto him. Chapter 12. In concluding our confessio, we earnestly admonish you to cast aside the worthless books of pseudo-alchemists and philosophers, of whom there are many in our age, who make light of the Holy Trinity and deceive the credulous with meaningless enigmas. One of the greatest of these is a stage player, a man with sufficient ingenuity for imposition. Such men are mingled by the enemy of human welfare among those who seek to do good, thus making truth more difficult of discovery. Believe us, truth is simple and unconcealed, while falsehood is complex, deeply hidden, proud, and its fictitious worldly knowledge, seemingly a glitter with godly luster, is often mistaken for divine wisdom. You that are wise will turn from these false teachings and come to us, who seek not your money, but freely offer you our greater treasure. We desire not your goods, but that you should become partakers of our goods. We do not deride parables, but invite you to understand all parables and all secrets. Chapter 13. Now that we have made our position clear, that we sincerely confess Christ, disavow the papacy, devote our lives to true philosophy and worthy living, and daily invite and admit into our fraternity the worthy of all nations, who thereafter share with us the fight of God. Chapter 14. Again we warn those who are dazzled by the glitter of gold, or those who now upright, might be turned by great riches to a life of idleness and pomp, not to disturb our sacred silence with their clamorings. For though there be a medicine which will cure all diseases and give unto all men wisdom, yet it is against the will of God that men should attain to understanding by any means other than virtue, labor, and integrity. We are not permitted to manifest ourselves to any man except it be by the will of God. Alchemy and its exponents. Is the transmutation of base metals into gold possible? Is the idea one at which the learned of the modern world can afford to scoff? Alchemy was more than a speculative art. It was also an operative art. Since the time of the immortal Hermes, alchemists have asserted, and not without substantiating evidence, that they could manufacture gold from tin, silver, lead, and mercury. That the galaxy of brilliant philosophic and scientific minds who, over a period of 2,000 years, affirmed the actuality of metallic transmutation and multiplication, could be completely sane and rational on all other problems of philosophy and science, yet hopelessly mistaken on this one point, is untenable. Nor is it reasonable that the hundreds declaring to have seen and performed transmutations of metals could all have been dupes, imbeciles, or liars. Those assuming that all alchemists were of unsound mentality would be forced to put in this category nearly all the philosophers and scientists of the ancient and medieval worlds. Emperors, princes, priests, and common townsfolk have witnessed the apparent miracle of metallic metamorphosis. In the face of existing testimony, anyone is privileged to remain unconvinced, but the scoffer elects to ignore evidence worthy of respectful consideration. Many great alchemists and Hermetic philosophers occupy an honored niche in the Hall of Fame, while their multitudinous critics remain obscure. To list all these sincere seekers after nature's great arcanum is impossible, but a few will suffice to acquaint the reader with the superior types of intellect who interested themselves in this abstruse subject. Among the more prominent names are those of Thomas Norton, Isaac of Holland, Basil Valentine, the supposed discoverer of antimony, Jean de Meung, Roger Bacon, Albertus Magnus, Corsitanus Gerber, the Arabian who brought the knowledge of alchemy to Europe through his writings, Paracelsus, Nicholas Flamel, John Frederick Helvetius, Raymond Lilly, Alexander Sethen, Michael Sendivogius, Count Bernard of Treviso, Sir George Ripley, Picus de Mirandola, John Dee, Henry Cunrath, Michael Meyer, Thomas Vaughan, J.B. von Helmont, John Haydon, Lascaris, Thomas Charnock, Synesius, Bishop of Ptolemais, Morio, the Comte de Cagliostro, and the Comte de Saint-Germain. There are legends to the effect that King Solomon and Pythagoras were alchemists, and that the former manufactured by alchemical means the gold used in his temple. Albert Pike takes sides with the alchemical philosophers by declaring that the gold of the Hermetists was a reality. He says, "The Hermetic science, like all the real sciences, is mathematically demonstrable. Its results, even material, are as rigorous as that of a correct equation. The Hermetic gold is not only a true dogma, a light without shadow, a truth without alloy of falsehood. It is also a material gold, real, pure, the most precious that can be found in the mines of the earth." So much for the Masonic angle. William and Mary jointly ascended the throne of England in 1689, at which time alchemists must have abounded in the kingdom, for during the first year of their reign, they repealed an act made by King Henry IV in which that sovereign declared the multiplying of metals to be a crime against the crown. In Dr. Sigismund Backstrom's collection of alchemical manuscripts is a handwritten copy of the act passed by William and Mary, copied from Chapter 30 of Statutes at Large for the first year of their reign. The act reads as follows: "An act to repeal the statute made in the 5th year of King Henry IV, late King of England, wherein it was enacted, among other things, in these words, or to this effect, namely, that none from henceforth should use to multiply gold or silver, or use the craft of multiplication, and if any the same do, they shall incur the pain of felon." The remarkable cures which Paracelsus effected only made his enemies hate him more bitterly, for they could not duplicate the apparent miracles which he wrought. He not only treated the more common diseases of his day, but is said to have actually cured leprosy, cholera, and cancer. His friends claimed for him that he all but raised the dead. His systems of healing were so heterodox, however, that slowly but surely his enemies overwhelmed him and again forced him to leave the fields of his labors and seek refuge where he was not known. There is much controversy concerning the personality of Paracelsus. That he had an irascible disposition, there is no doubt. His bard for physicians and for women amounted to a mania. For them, he had nothing but abuse. As far as can be learned, there was never a love affair in his life. His peculiar appearance and immoderate system of living were always held against him by his adversaries. It is believed that his physical abnormalities may have been responsible for much of the bitterness against society which he carried with him throughout all his intolerant and tempestuous life. His reputed intemperance brought upon him still more persecution, for it was asserted that even during the time of his professorship in the University of Basel, he was seldom sober. Such an accusation is difficult to understand in view of the marvelous mental clarity for which he was noted at all times. The vast amount of writing which he accomplished, the Strasbourg edition of his collected works, is in 3 large volumes, each containing several hundred pages, is a monumental contradiction of the tales regarding his excessive use of alcoholics. No doubt, many of the vices of which he is accused were sheer inventions by his enemies, who, not satisfied with hiring assassins to murder him, sought to besmirch his memory after they had revengefully ended his life. The manner in which Paracelsus met his death is uncertain, but The most credible account is that he died as the indirect result of a scuffle with a number of assassins who had been hired by some of his professional enemies to make away with the one who had exposed their chicanery. Few manuscripts are extant in the handwriting of Paracelsus, for he dictated the majority of his works to his disciples, who wrote them down. Professor John Maxon Stillman of Stanford University pays the following tribute to his memory. Whatever be the final judgment as to the relative importance of Paracelsus in the upbuilding of medical science and practice, it must be recognized that he entered upon his career at Basel with the zeal and the self-assurance of one who believed himself inspired with a great truth and destined to effect a great advance in the science and practice of medicine. By nature, he was a keen and open-minded observer of whatever came under his observation, though probably also not a very critical analyst of the observed phenomena. He was evidently an unusually self-reliant and independent thinker, though the degree of originality in his thought may be a matter of legitimate differences of opinion. Certainly once having, from whatever combination of influences, made up his mind to reject the sacredness of the authority of Aristotle, Galen, and Avicenna, and having found what to his mind was a satisfactory substitute for the ancient dogmas in his own modification of the Neo-Platonic philosophy. Having cut loose from the dominant Galenism of his time, he determined to preach and teach that the basis of the medical science of the future should be the study of nature, observation of the patient, experiment and experience, and not the infallible dogmas of authors long dead. Doubtless, in the pride and self-confidence of his youthful enthusiasm, he did not rightly estimate the tremendous force of conservatism against which he directed his assaults. If so, his experience in Basel surely undeceived him. Raymond Lully. This most famous of all the Spanish alchemists was born about the year 1235. His father was seneschal to James I of Aragon, and young Raymond was brought up in the court, surrounded by the temptations and profligacy abounding in such places. He was later appointed to the position which his father had occupied. A wealthy marriage ensured Raymond's financial position, and he lived the life of a grandee. One of the most beautiful women at the court of Aragon was Donna Ambrosia, Eleonora di Castello, whose virtue and beauty had brought her great renown. She was at that time married, and was not particularly pleased to discover that young Lully was rapidly developing a passion for her. Wherever she went, Raymond followed, and at last, over a trivial incident, he wrote some very amorous verses to her, which produced an effect quite different from what he had expected. He received a message inviting him to visit the lady. He responded with alacrity. She told him that it was only fair that he should behold more of the beauty concerning which he wrote such appealing poems, and drawing aside part of her garments, disclosed that one side of her body was nearly eaten away by a cancer. Raymond never recovered from the shock. It turned the entire course of his life. He renounced the frivolities of the court and became a recluse. Sometime afterwards, while doing penance for his worldly sins, a vision appeared to him in which Christ told him to follow in the direction in which he should lead. Later the vision was repeated. Hesitating no longer, Raymond divided his property among his family and retired to a hut on the side of a hill, where he devoted himself to the study of Arabic, that he might go forth and convert the infidels. After 6 years in this retreat, he set out with a Mohammedan servant, who, when he learned that Raymond was about to attack the faith of his people, buried his knife in his master's back. Raymond refused to allow his would-be assassin to be executed, but later the man strangled himself in prison. When Raymond regained his health, he became a teacher of the Arabic language to those who intended traveling in the Holy Land. It was while so engaged that he came in contact with Arnold of Villanova, who taught him the principles of alchemy. As a result of this training, Raymond learned the secret of the transmutation and multiplication of metals. His life of wandering continued, and during the course of it, he arrived at Tunis, where he began to debate with the Mohammedan teachers, and nearly lost his life as the result of his fanatical attacks upon their religion. He was ordered to leave the country and never to return again upon pain of death. Notwithstanding their threats, he made a second visit to Tunis, but the inhabitants, instead of killing him, merely deported him to Italy. An unsigned article appearing in Household Words, number 273, a magazine conducted by Charles Dickens, throws considerable light on Lully's alchemical ability. Whilst at Vienna, he, Lully, received flattering letters from Edward II, King of England, and from Robert Bruce, King of Scotland, entreating him to visit them. He had also, in the course of his travels, met with John Cremer, Abbot of Westminster, with whom he formed a strong friendship, and it was more to please him than the king that Raymond consented to go to England. A tract by John Cremer appears in the Hermetic Museum, but there is no record in the annals of Westminster of anyone by that name. Cremer had an intense desire to learn the last great secret of alchemy, to make the powder of transmutation, and Raymond, with all his friendship, had never disclosed it. Cremer, however, set to work very cunningly. He was not long in discovering the object that was nearest to Raymond's heart, the conversion of the infidels. Nicholas Flamel. In the latter part of the 14th century, there lived in Paris one whose business was that of illuminating manuscripts and preparing deeds and documents. To Nicholas Flamel, the world is indebted for its knowledge of a most remarkable volume, which he bought for a paltry sum from some book dealer with whom his profession of scrivener brought him in contact. The story of this curious document, called the Book of Abraham the Jew, is best narrated in his own words, as preserved in his hieroglyphical figures. Whilst therefore I, Nicholas Flamel, notary, after the decease of my parents, got my living at our art of writing by making inventories, dressing accounts, and summing up the expenses of tutors and pupils, there fell into my hands, for the sum of 2 florins, a gilded book, very old and large. It was not of paper, nor of parchment, as other books be, but was only made of delicate rinds, as it seemed to me, of tender young trees. The cover of it was of brass, well bound, all engraven with letters, or strange figures, and for my part, I think they might well be Greek characters, or some such like ancient language. Sure I am, I could not read them, and I know well they were not notes, nor letters of the Latin nor of the Gaul, for of them we understand a little. As for that which was within it, the leaves of bark or rind were engraven and with admirable diligence written, with a point of iron, in fair and neat Latin letters colored. It contained thrice 7 leaves, for so were they counted in the top of the leaves, and always every 7th leaf there was painted a virgin and serpent swallowing her up. In the second 7th, a cross where a serpent was crucified, and the last 7th there were painted deserts, or wilderness, in the midst whereof ran many fair fountains, from whence there issued out a number of serpents, which ran up and down here and there. Upon the first of the leaves was written in great capital letters of gold, Abraham the Jew, prince, priest, Levite, astrologer, and philosopher, to the nation of the Jews, by the wrath of God, dispersed among the Gauls, sendeth health. After this it was filled with great execrations and curses, with this word Maranatha, which was often repeated there, against every person that should cast his eyes upon it, if he were not sacrificer or scribe. He that sold me this book knew not what it was worth, nor more than I when I bought it. I believe it had been stolen or taken from the miserable Jews, or found in some part of the ancient place of their abode. Within the book, in the second leaf, he comforted his nation, counseling them to fly vices, and above all, idolatry, attending with sweet patience the coming of the Messias, who should vanquish all the kings of the earth, and should reign with his people in glory eternally. Without doubt, this had been some very wise and understanding man. In the third leaf, and in all the other writings that followed, to help his captive nation to pay their tributes unto the Roman emperors, and to do other things, which I will not speak of, he taught them in common words the transmutation of metals. He painted the vessels by the sides, and he advertised them of the colors, and of all the rest, saving of the first agent, of the which he spake not a word, but only, as he said, in the 4th and 5th leaves, entire he painted it, and figured it with very great cunning and workmanship. For although it was well and intelligibly figured and painted, yet no man could ever have been able to understand it, without being well skilled in their Kabbalah, which goeth by tradition, and without having well studied their books. The 4th and 5th leaves, therefore, were without any writing, all full of fair figures enlightened, or as it were enlightened, for the work was very exquisite. Nicholas Flamel spent many years studying the mysterious book. He even painted the pictures from it all over the walls of his house and made numerous copies which he showed to the learned men with whom he came in contact, but none could explain their secret significance. At last, he determined to go forth in quest of an adept or wise man, and after many wanderings, he met a physician, by name Master Canches, who was immediately interested in the diagrams and asked to see the original book. They started forth together for Paris, and the way the physician adept explained many of the principles of the hieroglyphics to Flamel, but before they reached their journey's end, Master Canches was taken ill and died. Flamel buried him at Orleans, but having meditated deeply on the information he had secured during their brief acquaintance, he was able, with the assistance of his wife, to work out the formula for transmuting base metals into gold. He performed the experiment several times with perfect success, and before his death caused a number of hieroglyphic figures to be painted upon an arch of St. Innocent's churchyard in Paris, wherein he concealed the entire formula as it had been revealed to him from the Book of Abraham the Jew. Count Bernard of Treviso. Of all those who sought for the elixir of life and the philosopher's scone, few passed through the chain of disappointments that beset Count Bernard of Treviso, who was born in Padua in 1406 and died in 1490. His search for the philosopher's stone and the secret of the transmutation of metals began when he was but 14 years of age. He spent not only a lifetime, but also a fortune in his quest. Count Bernard went from one alchemist and philosopher to another, each of whom unfolded some pet theorem, which he eagerly accepted and experimented with, but always without the desired result. His family believed him to be mad and declared that he was disgracing his house by his experiments, which were rapidly reducing him to a state of penury. He traveled in many countries, hoping that in distant places he would find wise men capable of assisting him. At last, as he was approaching his 76th year, he was rewarded with success. The great secrets of the elixir of life, the philosopher's stone, and the transmutation of metals were revealed to him. He wrote a little book describing the results of his labors, and while he lived only a few years to enjoy the fruitage of his discovery, he was thoroughly satisfied that the treasure he had found was worth the lifetime spent in search of it. An example of the industry and perseverance displayed by him is to be found in one of the processes which some foolish pretender coaxed him to attempt, and which resulted in his spending 20 years calcining eggshells and nearly an equal period distilling alcohol and other substances. In the history of alchemical research, there never was a more patient and persevering disciple of the great arcanum. Bernard declared the process of dissolution, accomplished not with fire, but with mercury, to be the supreme secret of alchemy. The theory and practice of alchemy. Part 1. Alchemy, the secret art of the land of Chem, is one of the two oldest sciences known to the world. The other is astrology. The beginnings of both extend back into the obscurity of prehistoric times. According to the earliest records extant, alchemy and astrology were considered as divinely revealed to man so that by their aid he might regain his lost estate. According to old legends preserved by the rabbins, the angel at the gate of Eden instructed Adam in the mysteries of Kabbalah and of alchemy, promising that when the human race had thoroughly mastered the secret wisdom concealed within these inspired arts, the curse of the forbidden fruit would be removed, and man might again enter into the garden of the Lord. As man took upon himself coats of skins, physical bodies, at the time of his fall, so these sacred sciences were brought by him into the lower worlds, incarnated in dense vehicles, through which their spiritual transcendental natures could no longer manifest themselves. Therefore, they were considered as being dead or lost. The earthly body of alchemy is chemistry, for chemists do not realize that half of the Book of Torah is forever concealed behind the veil of Isis, see the tarot, and that so long as they study only material elements, they can at best discover but half of the mystery. Astrology has crystallized into astronomy, whose votaries ridicule the dreams of ancient seers and sages, deriding their symbols as meaningless products of superstition. Nevertheless, the intelligentsia of the modern world can never pass behind the veil which divides the seen from the unseen, except in the way appointed, the mysteries. What is lifeful? What is intelligence? What is force? These are the problems to the solution of which the ancients consecrated their temples of learning. Who shall say that they did not answer those questions? Who would recognize the answers if given? Is it possible that under the symbols of alchemy and astrology lies concealed a wisdom so abstruse that the mind of this race is not qualified to conceive its principles? The Chaldeans, Phoenicians, and Babylonians were familiar with the principles of alchemy, as were many early Oriental races. It was practiced in Greece and Rome, was the master science of the Egyptians. Chem was an ancient name for the land of Egypt, and both the words alchemy and chemistry are a perpetual reminder of the priority of Egypt's scientific knowledge. According to the fragmentary writings of those early peoples, alchemy was to them no speculative art. They implicitly believed in the multiplication of metals, and in the face of their reiterations, both the scholar and the materialist should be more kindly in their consideration of alchemical theorems. Evolutionists trace the ment of the arts and sciences up through the growing intelligence of the prehistoric man, while others, of a transcendental point of view, like to consider them as being direct revelations from God. Many interesting solutions to the riddle of alchemy's origin have been advanced. One is that alchemy was revealed to man by the mysterious Egyptian demigod Hermes Trismegistus. This sublime figure, looming through the mists of time and bearing in his hand the immortal emerald, is credited by the Egyptians as being the author of all the arts and sciences. In honor of him, all scientific knowledge was gathered under the general title of the Hermetic arts. When the body of Hermes was interred in the valley of Ebron, or Hebron, the divine emerald was buried with it. Many centuries afterward, the emerald was discovered, according to one version, by an Arabian initiate, according to another, by Alexander the Great, king of Macedon. During the Middle Ages, alchemy was not only a philosophy and a science, but also a religion. Those who rebelled against the religious limitations of their day concealed their philosophic teachings under the allegory of gold-making. In this way, they preserved their personal liberty and were ridiculed rather than persecuted. Alchemy is a threefold art. Its mystery, well symbolized by a triangle. Its symbol is 3 times 3, 3 elements or processes in 3 worlds or spheres. The 3 times 3 is part of the mystery of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, for 33 is 3 times 3, which is 9, the number of esoteric man and the number of emanations from the root of the divine tree. It is the number of worlds nourished by the 4 rivers that pour out of the divine mouth as the verbum fiat. Beneath the so-called symbolism of alchemy is concealed a magnificent concept, for this ridiculed and despised craft still preserves intact the triple key to the gates of eternal life. Realizing, therefore, that alchemy is a mystery in 3 worlds, the divine, the human, and the elemental, it can easily be appreciated why the sages and philosophers created and evolved an intricate allegory to conceal their wisdom. Alchemy is the science of multiplication and is based upon the natural phenomenon of growth. Nothing from nothing comes is an extremely ancient adage. Alchemy is not the process of making something from nothing. It is the process of increasing and improving that which already exists. If a philosopher were to state that a living man could be made from a stone, the unenlightened would probably exclaim, "Impossible!" Thus would they reveal their ignorance. For to the wise, it is known that in every stone is the seed of man. A philosopher might declare that a universe could be made out of a man, but the foolish would regard this as an impossibility, not realizing that a man is a seed from which a universe may be brought forth. God is the within and the without of all things. The Supreme One manifests himself through growth, which is an urge from within outward, a struggle for expression and manifestation. There is no greater miracle in the growing and multiplication of gold by the alchemist than in a tiny mustard seed producing a bush many thousands of times the size of the seed. If a mustard seed produces 100,000 times its own size and weight when planted in an entirely different substance, the earth, why should not the seed of gold be multiplied 100,000 times by art when that seed is planted in its earth, the base metals, and nourished artificially by the secret process of alchemy. Alchemy teaches that God is in everything, that he is one universal spirit, manifesting through an infinity of forms. God, therefore, is the spiritual seed planted in the dark earth, the material universe. By arc, it is possible so to grow and expand this seed that the entire universe of substance is tinctured thereby and becomes like unto the seed, pure gold. In the spiritual nature of man, this is termed regeneration. In the material body of the elements, it is called transmutation. As it is in the spiritual and material universes, so it is in the intellectual world. Wisdom cannot be imparted to an idiot because the seed of wisdom is not within him. But wisdom may be imparted to an ignorant person, however ignorant he may be, because the seed of wisdom exists in him and can be developed by art and culture. Hence, a philosopher is only an ignorant man within whose nature a projection has taken place. Through art, the process of learning, the whole mass of base metals, the mental body of ignorance, was transmuted into pure gold, wisdom, for it was tinctured with understanding. If, then, through faith and proximity to God, the consciousness of man may be transmuted from base animal desires, represented by the masses of the planetary metals, into a pure, golden, and godly consciousness, illumined and redeemed, and the manifesting God within that one, increased from a tiny spark to a great and glorious being. If also the base metals of mental ignorance can, through proper endeavor and training, be transmuted into transcendent genius and wisdom, why is the process in two worlds or spheres of application not equally true in the third? If both the spiritual and mental elements of the universe can be multiplied in their expression, then by the law of analogy, the material elements of the universe can also be multiplied if the necessary process can be ascertained. That which is true in the superior is true in the inferior. If alchemy be a great spiritual fact, then it is also a great material fact. If it can take place in the universe, it can take place in man. If it can take place in man, it can take place in the plants and minerals. If one thing in the universe grows, then everything in the universe grows. If one thing can be multiplied, then all things can be multiplied. For the superior agrees with the inferior, and the inferior agrees with the superior. But as the way for the redemption of the soul is concealed by the mysteries, so the secrets for the redemption of the metals are also concealed, that they may not fall into the hands of the profane, and thereby become perverted. If any would grow metals, he must first learn the secrets of the metals. He must realize that all metals, like all stones, plants, animals, and universes, grow from seeds, and that these seeds are already in the body of substance, the womb of the world virgin. For the seed of man is in the universe before he is born, or grows, and as the seed of the plant exists for all time, though the plant live but a part of that time, so the seeds of spiritual gold and material gold are ever present in all things. The metals grow throughout the ages because life is imparted to them from the sun. They grow imperceptibly, in form like tiny shrubs, for everything grows in some way. Only the methods of growth differ, according to kind and magnitude. One of the great axioms is, within everything is the seed of everything, although by the simple processes of nature it may remain latent for many centuries, or its growth may be exceedingly slow. Therefore, every grain of sand contains not only the seed of the precious metals, as well as the seed of the priceless gems, but also the seeds of sun, moon, and stars. As within the nature of man is reflected the entire universe in miniature, so in each grain of sand, each drop of water, each tiny particle of cosmic dust, are concealed all the parts and elements of cosmos in the form of tiny seed germs, so minute that even the most powerful microscope cannot detect them. Trillions of times smaller than the ion or electron, these seeds, unrecognizable and incomprehensible, await the time assigned them for growth and expression. Consider the monads of Leibniz. Alchemical symbolism. In alchemy, there are three symbolic substances: mercury, sulfur, and salt. To these was added a fourth mysterious life principle called azoth. Concerning the first three, Herr von Welling has written, "There are three basic chemical substances which are called by the philosophers salt, sulfur, and mercury, but which are not to be confounded in any way with the crude salt, sulfur, and mercury taken from the earth or secured from the apothecary. Salt, sulfur, and mercury each has a triune nature, for each of these substances contains, in reality, also the other two substances, according to the secret arcanum of the wise. The body of salt is therefore threefold, namely salt, sulfur, and mercury, but in the body of salt one of the three, salt, predominates. Mercury is likewise composed of salt, sulfur, and mercury, with the latter element predominating. Sulfur, similarly, is actually salt, sulfur, and mercury, with sulfur predominating. These 9 divisions, 3 times 3, plus Azoth, the mysterious universal life force, equals 10, the sacred decad of Pythagoras. Concerning the nature of Azoth, there is much controversy. Some view it as the invisible eternal fire, others as electricity, still others as magnetism. Transcendentalism refer to it as the astral light. The universe is surrounded by the sphere of the stars. Beyond that sphere is the sphere of Shemayim, which is the divine fiery water, the first outflow of the Word of God, the flaming river pouring from the presence of the Eternal. Shemayim, the fiery androgynous water, divides. The fire becomes the solar fire, and the water becomes the lunar water. Shemayim is the universal mercury, sometimes called Azoth, the measureless spirit of life. The spiritual fiery original water Shemayim comes through Eden, in Hebrew, vapor, and pours itself into 4 main rivers, the elements. This is the river of living water, Azoth, the fiery mercurial essence that flows out from the throne of God and the Lamb. In this Eden, vaporous essence or mist is the spiritual earth, incomprehensible and intangible, or the dust Afar, out of which God formed Adam min Hadamah, the spiritual body of man, which body must sometime become revealed. In another part of his writings, von Welling also says that there was no material universe until Lucifer, attempting to perform the cosmic alchemy, misused the Shemayim, or the divine fire. In order to re-establish the Shemayim which Lucifer had perverted, this universe was formed as a means of liberating it from the dark cloud within which it was locked by the failure of Lucifer's attempt to control it. These statements clearly emphasize the fact that the early philosophers recognized in the Bible a book of chemical and alchemical formulae. It is essential that this point be kept in mind at all times. Woe to that seeker who accepts as literal the rambling allegories of the alchemists. Such a one can never enter the inner sanctuary of truth. Elias Ashmole, in his Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, thus describes the methods employed by the alchemists to conceal their true doctrines. Their chiefest study was to wrap up their secrets in fables and spin out their fancies in veils and shadows, whose radii seems to extend every way, yet so that they meet in a common center and point only at one thing. The Theory and Practice of Alchemy. Part 2. All true philosophers of the natural or Hermetic sciences begin their labors with a prayer to the supreme alchemist of the universe, beseeching his assistance in the consummation of the magnum opus. The prayer that follows, written in a provincial German centuries ago by an adept now unknown, is representative. O holy and hallowed Trinity, thou undivided and triple unity, cause me to sink into the abyss of thy limitless eternal fire, for only in that fire can the mortal nature of man be changed into humble dust, while the new body of the salt union lies in the light. O melt me and transmute me in this thy holy fire, so that on the day at thy command the fiery waters of the Holy Spirit draw me out from the dark dust, giving me new birth and making me alive with his breath. May I also be exalted through the humble humility of thy Son, rising through his assistance out of the dust and ashes, and changing into a pure spiritual body of rainbow colors, like unto the transparent, crystal-like, paradisiacal gold, that my own nature may be redeemed and purified like the elements before me in these glasses and bottles. Diffuse me in the waters of life, as though I were in the wine cellar of the eternal Solomon. Here the fire of thy love will receive new fuel and will blaze forth so that no streams can extinguish it. Through the aid of this divine fire, may I in the end be found worthy to be called into the illumination of the righteous. May I then be sealed up with the light of the new world, that I may also attain unto the immortality and glory, where there shall be no more alternation of light and darkness. Amen. The origin of alchemical formulae. Apparently, but few of the medieval alchemists discovered the great arcanum without aid, some authors declaring that none of them attained the desired end without the assistance of a master or teacher. In every instance, the identity of these masters has been carefully concealed, and even during the Middle Ages, speculation ran rife concerning them. It was customary to call such illuminated sages adepts, a title which indicated that they possessed the true secrets of transmutation and multiplication. These adepts were polyonymous individuals who unexpectedly appeared and disappeared again, leaving no trace of their whereabouts. There are indications that a certain degree of organization existed among them. The most powerful of the alchemical organizations were the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati, and certain Arabian and Syrian sects. In the documents which follow, references are made to the Brethren, or Brothers. These are to signify that those who had actually accomplished the magnum opus were banded together and known to each other by cipher codes and secret signs or symbols. Apparently, a number of these illuminated adepts dwelt in Arabia, for several of the great European alchemists were initiated in Asia Minor. When a disciple of the alchemical arts had learned the supreme secret, he guarded it jealously, revealing to no man his priceless treasure. He was not permitted to disclose it even to the members of his immediate family. As the years passed, one who had discovered the secret, or more properly, one to whom it had been revealed, sought for some younger man worthy to be entrusted with the formulas. To this one, and to this one only, as a rule, the philosopher was permitted to disclose the arcanum. The younger man then became the philosophical son of the old sage, and to him the latter bequeathed his secrets. Occasionally, however, an adept, on finding a sincere and earnest seeker, would instruct him in the fundamental principles of the art, and if the disciple persisted, he was quietly initiated into the august fraternity of the Brethren. In such manner, the alchemical processes were preserved, but the number of those who knew them did not increase rapidly. The Emerald Table of Hermes. The oldest and most revered of all the alchemical formulae is the sacred Emerald Tablet of Hermes. Authorities do not agree as to the genuineness of this table, some declaring it to be a post-Christian fraud, but there is much evidence that, regardless of its author, the table is of great antiquity. While the symbol of the Emerald Table is of special Masonic import, relating as it does to the personality of Hiram, it is first and fundamentally an alchemical formula, relating both to the alchemy of the base metals and the divine alchemy of human regeneration. In Dr. Sigismund Backstrom's collection of alchemical manuscripts is a section devoted to the translations and interpretations of this remarkable tablet, which was known to the ancients as the Tabula Smaragdina. Dr. Backstrom was initiated into the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross on the island of Mauritius by one of those unknown adepts who at that time called himself Comte de Chazal. Dr. Backstrom's translations and notes on the Emerald Tablet are, in part, as follows, the actual text being reproduced in capital letters. The Emerald Table, the most ancient monument of the Chaldeans concerning the lapis philosophorum, the stone of the philosophers. The Emerald Table furnishes the origin of the allegorical history of King Hiram, rather Chiram. The Chaldeans, Egyptians, and Hebrews, in what concerns Chiram, have taken their knowledge from one and the same fountain. Homerus, who relates this history in a different manner, followed that original, and Virgil followed Homerus, as Hesiodus took the subject for his theogony likewise from thence, which Ovidius took afterwards for a pattern for his metamorphosis. The knowledge of nature's secret operations constitutes the principal sense of all these ancient writings, but ignorance framed out of it that external or veiled mythology and the lower class of people turned it into idolatry. The genuine translation from the original very ancient Chaldee is as follows. The secret works of Chiram I in essence, but three in aspect. The two first large words mean the secret work. The second line in large letters reads Chiram Telat Machasat, i.e. Chiram the universal agent, one in essence but three in aspect. It is true, no lie, certain, and to be depended upon, the superior agrees with the inferior and the inferior with the superior to effect that one truly wonderful work. As all things owe their existence to the will of the only one, so all things owe their origin to the one only thing, the most hidden, by the arrangement of the only God. The father of that one only thing is the sun, its mother is the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, but its nurse is a spirituous earth. That one only thing, after God, is the father of all things in the universe. Its power is perfect after it has been united to a spirituous earth. Process, first distillation. Separate that spirituous earth from the dense or crude by means of a gentle heat with much attention. Last digestion. In great measure, it ascends from the earth up to heaven and descends again, newborn, on the earth, and the superior and the inferior are increased in power. The azoth ascends from the earth, from the bottom of the glass, and redescends in veins and drops into the earth, and by this continual circulation, the azoth is more and more subtilized, volatilizes soul, and carries the volatilized solar atoms along with it, and thereby becomes a solar azoth, i.e. our third, and genuine Sophie Mercury, and this circulation of the solar azoth must continue until it ceases of itself, and the earth has sucked it all in. When it muse become the black pitchy matter, the toad, the substances in the alchemical retort, and also the lower elements in the body of man, which denotes complete putrefaction or death of the compound. By this thou wilt partake of the honors of the whole world. Without doubt, as the black, pitchy matter will and must of necessity become white and red, and the red having been carried to perfection, medicinally and for metals, is then fully capable to preserve mentem sanum in corpore sano until the natural period of life, and promise us ample means, in infinitum multipliable, to be benevolent and charitable without any diminution of our inexhaustible resources. Therefore well may it be called the glory honors of the whole world, as truly the study and contemplation of the LP, lapis philosophorum, harmonizing with divine truths, elevates the mind to God our Creator and merciful Father. And if he should permit us to possess it practically, must eradicate the very principle of avarice, envy, and evil inclinations, and cause our hearts to melt in gratitude toward him that has been so kind to us. Therefore the philosophers say with great truth that the LP either finds a good man or makes one, and darkness will fly from thee. By invigorating the organs the soul makes use of for communicating with exterior objects, the soul must acquire greater powers not only for conception, but also for retention. And therefore, if we wish to obtain still more knowledge, the organs and secret springs of physical life being wonderfully strengthened and invigorated, the soul must acquire new powers for conceiving and retaining, especially if we pray to God for knowledge and confirm our prayers by faith. All obscurity must vanish, of course. That this has not been the case with all possessors was their own fault, as they contented themselves merely with the transmutation of metals. Use. This is the strength of all powers. This is a very strong figure, to indicate that the LP positively does possess all the powers concealed in nature, not for destruction, but for exaltation and regeneration of matter in the three departments of nature. With this thou wilt be able to overcome all things, and to transmute all what is fine, OD, and what is coarse, AU9CF9. It will conquer every subtle thing, of course, as it refixes the most subtle oxygen into its own fiery nature, and that with more power, penetration, and virtue, in a tenfold ratio at every multiplication, and each time in a much shorter period, until its power becomes incalculable, which multiplied power also penetrates, overcomes every solid thing, such as unconquerable gold and silver, the otherwise unalterable mercury, crystals and glass fluxes, to which it is able to give natural hardness and fixity, as Philolitha does attest, and is proved by an artificial diamond in my father's time, in possession of Prince Liechtenstein in Vienna, valued at 500,000 ducats, fixed by the lapis philosopher's stone. In this manner the world was created. The arrangements to follow this road are hidden. For this reason I am called Chiram Telat Mekasat, one in essence, but three in aspect. In this trinity is hidden the wisdom of the whole world, i.e. in Chiram and its use. It is thought that Hermes was Moses or Zoroaster, otherwise Hermes signifies a serpent, and the serpent used to be an emblem of knowledge or wisdom. The serpent is met with everywhere amongst the hieroglyphics of the ancient Egyptians. So is the globe with wings, the sun and moon, dragons and griffins, whereby the Egyptians denoted their sublime knowledge of the lapis philosophorum. According to Suidas, the hints in the scriptures, and even Denon, where he speaks of the sanctuaries of the ancient Egyptian temples. It is ended now, what I have said concerning the effects of the sun, finish of the Tabula Smaragdina. What I have said or taught of the solar work is now finished, the perfect seed, fit for multiplication. This I know is acknowledged to be the genuine Tabula Smaragdina Hermetis. A letter from the brothers of R.C. Rosecross. Although Eugenius Philalethes disclaimed membership in the Rosicrucian fraternity, it is believed that for a number of years he was the head of that order. In a little work called Lumen de Lumii, or A New Magical Light Discovered and Communicated to the World, published in London in 1651, Eugenius Philalethes gives a remarkable letter, presumably from the Rosicrucian order. Accompanying the letter is an emblematic figure setting forth in symbolic form the processes and formulae of the philosopher's stone. This epistle is an excellent example of the Rosicrucian system of combining abstract theological speculations with concrete chemical formulas. With the aid of the material contained in various parts of this present book, the student would do well to set himself the task of solving the riddle contained in this hieroglyph. A letter from the brothers of R.C. concerning the invisible, magical mountain and the treasure therein contained. Every man naturally desires a superiority to have treasures of gold and silver, intellect and soul, and to seem great in the eyes of the world. God indeed created all things for the use of man, that he might rule over them, and acknowledge therein the singular goodness and omnipotence of God, give him thanks for his benefits, honor him, and praise him. But there is no man looks after these things, otherwise than by spending his days idly. They would enjoy them without any previous labor and danger. Neither do they look them out of that place where God hath treasured them up, who expects also that man should seek for them there, and to those that seek will he give them. But there is not any that labors for a possession in that place, and therefore these riches are not found. But it is not the will of God to conceal anything from those that are his, and therefore in this last age, before the final judgment comes, all these things shall be manifested to those that are worthy. As he himself, though obscurely, lest it should be manifested to the unworthy, hath spoken in a certain place, there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hidden that shall not be known. We therefore, being moved by the Spirit of God, do declare the will of God to the world, which we have also already performed and published in several languages. But most men either revile or contemn that our manifesto, the Fama and Confessio Fraternitatis, or else waiving the Spirit of God, they expect the proposals thereof from us, supposing we will straightway teach them how to make gold by art, or furnish them with ample treasures, whereby they may live pompously in the face of the world, swagger and make wars, turn usurers, gluttons, and drunkards, live unchastely, and defile their whole life with several other sins, all which things are contrary to the blessed will of God. It is expedient that every man should labor for this treasure by the assistance of God and his own particular search and industry. But the perverse intentions of these fellows we understand out of their own writings by the singular grace and revelation of God. We do stop our ears and wrap ourselves as it were in clouds, to avoid the bellowings and howlings of those men who in vain cry out for gold. And hence indeed it comes to pass that they brand us with infinite calumnies and slanders, which notwithstanding we do not resent, but God in his good time will judge them for it. But after that we had well known, though unowned to you, and perceived also by your writing, how diligently you are to peruse the Holy Scripture, and seek the true knowledge of God. We have also above many thousands thought you worthy of some answer, and we signify this much to you by the will of God and the admonition of the Holy Ghost. There is a mountain situated in the midst of the earth, or center of the world, which is both small and great. It is soft, also above measure hard and stony. It is far off and near at hand, but by the providence of God, invisible. In it are hidden most ample treasures, which the world is not able to value. This mountain, by envy of the devil, who always opposeth the glory of God and the happiness of man, is compassed about with very cruel beasts and other sick ravenous birds, which make the way thither both difficult and dangerous, and therefore hitherto, because the time is not yet come, the way thither could not be sought after, nor found out. But now at last the way is to be found by those that are worthy, but notwithstanding by every man's self-labor and endeavors. To this mountain you shall go in a certain night when it comes, most long and most dark, and see that you prepare yourselves by prayer. Insist upon the way that leads to the mountain, but ask not of any man where the way lies. Only follow your guide, who will offer himself to you, and will meet you in the way, but you shall not know him. This guide will bring you to the mountain at midnight, when all things are silent and dark. It is necessary that you arm yourselves with a resolute, heroic courage, lest you fear those things that will happen and so fall back. You need no sword, nor any other bodily weapons. Only call upon God sincerely and heartily. When you have discovered the mountain, the first miracle that will appear is this: a most vehement and very great wind that will shake the mountain and shatter the rocks to pieces. You shall be encountered also by lions and dragons and other terrible beasts, but fear not any of these things. Be resolute and rake heed that you return not, for your guide who brought you thither will not suffer any evil to befall you. As for the treasure, it is not yet discovered, but it is very near. After this wind will come an earthquake that will overthrow those things which the wind hath left and make all flat. But be sure that you fall not off. The earthquake being past, there shall follow a fire that will consume the earthly rubbish and discover the treasure, but as yet you cannot see it. After all these things, and near the daybreak, there shall be a great calm, and you shall see the day star arise, and the dawning will appear, and you shall perceive a great treasure. The chiefest thing in it, and the most perfect, is a certain exalted tincture, with which the world, if it served God and were worthy of such gifts, might be tinged and turned into most pure gold. This tincture being used, as your guide shall reach you, will make you young when you are old, and you shall perceive no disease in any part of your bodies. By means of this tincture also, you shall find pearls of that excellency which cannot be imagined. But do not you arrogate anything to yourselves because of your present power, but be contented with that which your guide shall communicate to you. Praise God perpetually for this his gift, and have a special care that you use it not for worldly pride, but employ it in such works which are contrary to the world. Use it rightly, and enjoy it so, as if you had it not. Live a temperate life, and beware of all sin, otherwise your guide will forsake you, and you shall be deprived of this happiness. For know this of a truth, whosoever abuseth this tincture and lives not exemplarily, purely, and devoutly before men, he shall lose this benefit, and scarce any hope will there be left ever to recover it afterwards. If, as transcendentalists believe, the initiations into the fraternity of the Rose Cross were given in the invisible worlds which surround and interpenetrate the visible universe, it is not beyond the range of possibility that this allegory is to be considered in the light of an initiatory ritual as well as an alchemical formula. As has been noted, it is difficult to secure a complete formula for any of the alchemical operations. The one presented here is the most nearly complete of any available. The collecting of the rays and energies of the celestial bodies as precipitated in dew is a process which Paracelsus used with great success. Bear constantly in mind that these processes are only for those who have been properly instructed in the secret art. A true revelation of the manual operation for the universal medicine commonly called the Philosopher's Stone. By the celebrated philosopher of Leyden, as attested upon his deathbed with his own blood, Anno Domini 1662. To my loving cousin and son, the true Hermetic philosopher, dear loving cousin and son, although I had resolved never to give in writing to any person the secret of the ancient sages, yet notwithstanding out of peculiar affection and love to you, I have taken it upon me, to which the nearness of our relation obliges me, and especially because this temporal life is short, and art is very dark, and you may therefore not attain the wished-for end. But my son, because so precious a jewel, belongs not to swine, and also this so great a gift of God may be treated carefully and Christian-like. In consideration thereof, I do so largely declare myself to thee. I conjure thee with hand and mouth sacredly, first, that most especially thou faithfully keep the same from all wicked, lustful, and criminal persons. Secondly, that thou exalt not thyself in any way. Thirdly, that thou seek to advance the honor of thy Creator of all things and the good of thy neighbor. Preserve it sacredly, that thy Lord may not have cause to complain of thee at the last day. I have written here in this treatise such a part of the kingdom of heaven, just as I myself have worked this treasure and finished it with my fingers. Therefore I have subscribed all this work with my blood, lying on my deathbed in Leyden. The process. In the name of God, take of the purest and cleanest salt, sea salt, so as it is made by the sun itself, such as is brought by shipping from Spain. I used salt that came from St. Uber. Let it be dried in a warm stove. Grind it in a stone mortar, as fine as possible to a powder, that it may be so much the easier dissolve, and taken up by our dew water, which is thus to be had in the months of May or June. When the moon is at the full, observe when the dew falls with an east or southeast wind. Then you must have sticks about 1.5 feet high above the ground when driven in the earth. Upon 2 or 3 such sticks, lay some 4 square plates of glass, and as the dew falls, it easily fastens on the glass like a vapor. Then have glass vessels in readiness. Let the dew drain from the sides of the glasses into your vessels. Do this until you have enough. The full of the moon is a good season. Afterwards it will be hard. The solar rays descending from the sun carry with them solar sulfur, the divine fire. These rays are crystallized by contact with the lunar rays. The solar rays are also met by the emanations pouring upward from the Earth's surface and are thus still further crystallized into a partly tangible substance which is soluble in pure water. This substance is the magical mountain of the moon, referred to in the RC letter. The crystallization of the solar and lunar rays in water, dew, produces the virgin earth, a pure invisible substance, uncontaminated by material matter. When the virgin earth crystals are wet, they appear green, when dry, white.